Hey guys, and welcome back to the Limit Breakers podcast. Cameron here, and this episode's going to be more of a status update than anything else. Give you guys a good sense of where we are, kind of get things back on track, and hopefully get caught up. So, let's do it. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Limit Breakers podcast. It has been quite some time since we've actually done an episode. We published an episode not too terribly long ago, our Final Fantasy Tactics episode, but that was recorded quite a bit previous to that, I think on 4th of July weekend. So we are back here actually recording again. I am joined today by the one, the only Justin. What's going on, Justin?
Hey, how's it going? Justin coming at you.
I think you'll notice from the fact that it's just Justin and I today that Steve is not here, and we're going to get into why that is in just a couple minutes. But before we do, as we usually like to start out, how's it going, Justin? We've seen each other a little bit, but surprisingly, we actually seen each other a little bit less since the last episode, so this is kind of a chance to catch up. What's going on?
Not too much. I just got back from a vacation in Colorado. It was very nice. But looking forward to getting back into some gaming and just talking about some of the new stuff that's happening in the gaming world.
Was there any mobile gaming going on in the dispensaries out there, or not that you saw?
No, a lot of people panhandling. I'm assuming for mobile add-ons and things like that. But
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now I think the main thing we want to do with this episode that we kind of planned it around is sort of a status update to tell you guys sort of why we took a little hiatus, where we are now, and kind of how we see things going in the future. Before we get right into sort of that meat and potatoes part of the episode, just get caught up on a couple things we've been into and kind of spending our time doing recently. Justin mentioned he had been traveling, but I've been, the two things I really wanted to spotlight that I've been doing. One, I've been playing Breath of Fire 3, that I know is near and dear to both Justin and my heart.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think to this day, we still kind of, when we think of the game, we think of our friend Andrew coming down in the middle of us playing it and just saying, "What is this childish shit?" Because I guess the old sprite animations made him think it was some like old retro SNES game or something. You remember that?
Well, in a sense, I mean, Breath of Fire is like an old SNES game. I mean, some of the old ones.
Well, the original one. Yeah, I'm talking about Breath of Fire.
I know.
Oh, okay. Well, Breath of Fire 3. Yeah, I've been playing Breath of Fire 3 for the PSP. It's a game it started kind of, I don't know, a number of copies on over the years. A couple I played with Justin, a couple on my own. Never quite beat, and just having it playable and accessible on the PSP has made it a really fun one to go back to. So I'm probably roughly halfway through that. I don't know if it's kind of hard to judge, but I've had a lot of fun with it and kind of remembered why I liked it so much before. The other thing I really wanted to spotlight was this is just as much kind of gaming related as it is me just sort of fanboying over it, but the show Stranger Things, could not more highly recommend it. It's probably been my favorite bit of TV in quite a number of years. I've watched it now in its entirety twice, once on my own, once with a friend. Couldn't more highly recommend it, but the one reason it really stands out to me as being relevant here is because I read an interview with the Duffer Brothers who created the show, and it was really, really cool to hear that they're big gamers, and that a couple games they played recently really influenced the show big time. And the games they specifically mentioned were Silent Hill, which I think to anyone who's watched the show, they pretty obviously see why the visual aspect of Silent Hill really communicates through in Stranger Things. They also referenced The Last of Us and Uncharted, both Naughty Dog games. And I think they specifically said that not so much in terms of the plot or narrative of those games, but more just the emotional impact of the characters and sort of the emotional impact of the story were things that were very much in their mind while they were creating the show. So it was just really nice to see a show that was, so entertaining first and foremost, but also creators that were so inspired by gaming. I know we talked, a couple episodes ago about sort of the tie between games and movies and TV in terms of like storytelling. And I don't know, there's something kind of exciting to me just about knowing that video games are starting to sort of reach that echelon that movies and TV are on. Do you think we're close at all to reaching that point yet, or?
I mean, I hope so. You're speaking about Stranger Things, and a stranger thing that I would like to talk about is I was watching
you hitting the table.
Well, yeah, but I was going to talk about a video game documentary I actually watched recently, and of course everybody's probably super familiar with this, but the whole ET gaming cartridge controversy. I was watching a documentary on HBO one morning about that, and it's just mind-boggling, just the whole cartridges being dumped in the dumpster and in the I guess landfill, really not a dumpster, but I just thought it was strange. You were talking about Stranger Things, and I just felt the need to mention it.
I do think not only was it the show influenced by E.T., but it is kind of hilarious. I know sort of like an element of that story, but not all of it. Was it just that the game was like a massive flop and they needed to dispose of like a bunch of overprinted cartridges essentially? Or
I mean, I would say it's a huge, massive floppy hit, but
yeah.
I mean, it came out around Christmas time back in E.T. came out in '87, so I'm gonna say like late '80s, and it was such a complicated game. Came out around Christmas time, like nobody knew how to really beat it, and I guess just the sales kind of flopped, and like some other more popular games were coming out around the same time, so it just kind of missed its mark. And then years later, when it was brought up that like the company had dumped all these games in the landfill, people were just so curious as to like where they could find one and scoop one up. So it was just crazy to see like people driving like thousands of miles to like stand around in like a landfill and just watch people like excavate, like archaeologists, and do like a archaeological dig, basically trying to unearth these games.
It's so funny now to comprehend the idea of like post internet, a game that's so difficult to beat that they literally just dispose of every trace of it ever existing. Like nowadays you get stumped on something, you pull out your smartphone, you search it up. Back then you literally just put them in a backhoe and dumped them into a dump and never reference it again. That's pretty awesome.
Captain Planet would be proud, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very, very, very biodegradable, I imagine. But no, check out Stranger Things. Also check out that documentary. Both I think we'd recommend, and are both just sort of interesting, kind of fringy type things, but interesting things nonetheless. Now, I guess we can't beat around the bush anymore about why it's just Justin and I down here by our lonesome doing the podcast. That is, in fact, because Steve is no longer going to be a permanent part of the podcast, I'm sorry to say. I want to thank him sincerely, and I'll give Justin a chance to say his own piece, but I want to thank him sincerely for doing the podcast with us. I thought he brought some awesome insight. It was so much fun to speak to him about the topics. It's kind of ironic that he's leaving the podcast as a permanent fixture right now, because I had spent so much time editing the Final Fantasy Tactics episode, and so much of what he said was just so interesting and unique that I feel like we're really going to miss that perspective. But yeah, Steve has other commitments that are just keeping him from being able to really do this with us all the time. And we don't want this to become a burden on him. We only really want him here doing it if he wants to be doing it. So, best of luck to you, Steve. Hopefully you could be on as a guest, sometime soon. But for the time being, Steve is not going to be with us. Justin, you want to say your piece?
Well, I mean, I feel like the only thing that needs to be said is that I'm going to have to do a lot more talking. And as Steve very much knows, I hate talking. But I'm doing the podcast because what else am I going to do with my life?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's no. I do think it's important to communicate that, we kind of made this decision to do this podcast together, and I've sort of been the one sort of pushing the most for it. But Justin's been incredibly cool and like been an integral part of it. Steve, it just wasn't possible for him to keep doing it right now. So as far as the way we want to proceed, now I love doing it. I've really enjoyed doing all the episodes. I like just sitting back and talking about this stuff, about this stuff with you guys. And just in general, I've really enjoyed it. So I want, with every fiber of my being to continue doing this in some capacity. And I think I fully intend to. I think Justin's mentioned he fully intends to also. So for the time being, I think what we want to do is just keep the format very much the same. As Justin mentioned, he'll be doing some more of the heavy lifting himself in terms of the content. But we're going to try to have guests on as much as we can. So in a given episode, it should still be 3 people almost all the time. It'll just be sort of a rotation of different people. But I wanted to absolutely communicate that we've appreciated so much the people that have listened. I've had so much fun doing it. I don't want to speak for Justin, but I know he's enjoyed it enough to warrant being here now, and I really appreciate that from him. But yeah, Steve is no longer a permanent part for the time being. We're going to keep giving it a go, bring guests on when we can, and just kind of take it as it comes. This was always going to be sort of a free-flowing thing, but this is just a curveball that we will take and run with. Anything you want to add?
Well, you were just talking about heavy lifting, and I was just thinking about how I did some recent heavy lifting over the weekend in terms of I went to the video game store over the weekend, and I picked up a very excellent deal, $24, all 3 Metal Gear Solid 1 through 3 in my possession for the first time. Long overdue. Looking forward to playing it, and one man's loss is another man's gain. So Steve not being here is my gain, because now I have some games that I can talk about without him. I know that was a game that he was really into, but I guess I'm going to steal the spotlight on this one and talk about one of his favorite games that he's played.
I don't use Ferris Bueller's preferred term choice very frequently, but I will call that $24 pickup absolutely choice. I mean, coming from a very, very, very big Metal Gear fan, it was very exciting for me to hear that Justin had picked up the first 3 games in the series, because not only would I personally recommend them, but I do feel like they're very important just games in the history of gaming, and I'm excited to see him play them and sort of see what his reaction is. And I think that's going to coincide perfectly with hopefully a Metal Gear episode coming up soon. We have a guest in mind for that. I've beaten all the games in the main series. It's one of my favorite series ever. I've wanted to talk about it for quite some time, and this is going to be a perfect opportunity for Justin to play them all and really have the perspective of a new player. So have you actually dove in yet, or are you still waiting to take that first leap?
It is forthcoming, and I'm happy to provide an update in a future episode when we either talk about it or when we give a news update next time.
Well, may the Solid Snake be with you.
And also with you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the main purpose of this episode was just to get back on board with stuff. You know, we initially took the major hiatus because of a lot of personal stuff going on. I mentioned this in the video, but being here with Justin now is kind of a nice time to kind of reiterate it. Yeah, I was going through a job transition and a couple things all at once that just made maintaining the podcast at the same regularity we were just very difficult. But throughout it all, you know, I was definitely aware of the fact that I wanted to get back to making it. It wasn't a case at all of not making it because, you know, I didn't enjoy it or we weren't enjoying it. It's just, you know, doing this as people know that, you know, do it themselves. It's time consuming. It's tough. It's tough to find time, you know, within our own schedules. It's tough to then, you know, get it edited and put out, but it's definitely worth it to me. It's definitely worth it to us. So I think we're going to keep trying to do it. But the hiatus, yeah, it went on a little bit longer than I think we meant for it to. But ultimately, we want to try to get back to, you know, where we were of, you know, putting stuff out regularly. I don't know if weekly. I think weekly is a goal we want to shoot for. Whether or not weekly is the actual speed we maintain right now, it will be the case or not. But I think that's going to be the aim. And really, I just didn't want any more time to pass without us sort of touching base with you guys about where we were coming from, what we were doing, and just kind of, you know, the way things were, because I know quite some time had passed there. Do you want to weigh in at all, Justin? Or you just want to get to some gaming news?
I think we've chit-chatted enough about the status of the podcast. I thank anybody for listening this long just about that, and let's just delve into some gaming news.
Yes, I agree. That's a very nice segue. I know you had mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about sort of Sony's new diving headfirst into the mobile market and how that might have been influenced by Pokemon Go.
Yeah, and I think I would like to pose the question, first of all, because we're talking about Pokemon Go, is for you, is it Pokemon Go or Pokemon No? I mean, how are you feeling about the mobile gaming trend? How are you feeling about the resurgence of Pokemon? You know, it's been many years since I've played like the Game Boy versions, red and blue and silver and all of those, and now to just see a new generation of people playing it and seeing how that's like shaping the gaming market. How do you feel about that?
I'm kind of split. I'm perfectly fine and almost happy with the resurgence of Pokemon, because even though I hadn't played Pokemon myself in quite some time, I did pick up Alpha Sapphire for the 3DS, you know, months ago, and I played that a bit and really enjoyed it. But before I got that, yeah, I hadn't played a Pokemon game since Blue back in like upon release, so it had been quite some time. So I'm cool with Pokemon being big again. You know, Pokemon I think is a really well-designed series. I have no issue with it. It's kind of cool to see, you know, a new generation of young kids like it. But the mobile market is something I've expressed in the past isn't really for me. I think there's just something about, I already get kind of annoyed by people that are on their phones constantly anyway. So when you add sort of that level of kind of constantly being surrounded by something and add the element of gaming to it, it almost makes me resent it more. You know, like, I don't think a Final Fantasy game is necessarily meant to be played, you know, at a red light on your phone while you're driving to work. You know, it's just an experience that doesn't lend itself towards being played on a phone, in my opinion. You know, I know it for some people, it's a matter of convenience and having that they want to play it, you know, on their lunch break or on their commute, something like that. I understand that can be convenient for people, but overall, I've never been much of a mobile gamer. I have gotten some handheld consoles, but not actual phone games. So I don't think for the most part you've been much of a phone gamer, but
I have not. And as far as the game itself, I mean, I've heard great things about it, But yeah, I feel like it's just been taken to such an extreme that I never really expected. I mean, I know people that I personally worked with that will after work literally go outside and go on 4-hour walks in downtown Baltimore and just literally looking for Pokemon and trying to collect them all. And it's just mind blowing to me that somebody would actually spend that amount of time doing that, especially now, like, because I feel like the show's not really that popular anymore and things like that. To just really see, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I guess what I'm saying is I appreciate the ingenuity of the game, but I also just hate the fact that it's also like taking over people's lives. I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I know where you're coming from. It's one of those really weird pieces of pop culture where a lot of people are into it that you wouldn't expect to be into it, and you can't quite put your finger on why. Like, if you would have told me half the people that were online posting about like Pokestops and whatnot, I've never actually played Pokemon Go, so I'm probably a poor point of reference because a lot of what people would post, I wasn't even actually sure what it was because I wasn't playing. But in general, I knew what they were referring to. But yeah, like people that had never expressed any interest in Pokemon or gaming in general or phone gaming or RPGs were all of a sudden like spending their weekends driving around and like trying to catch Pokemon. Like it was cool because you saw people gaming that normally wouldn't be gaming, but it was also kind of weird because it's like, what is it about this game that's making these random people like so interested? I mean, I guess it encourages, getting out of the house and like exercising to some extent. That's cool. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I couldn't personally figure out why people liked it so much. It just seems so odd. I mean, the games have been around for so long.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it in past episodes where we were just talking about how, when we were talking about the EverQuest episode and things like that, and just how many hours people will dedicate to stuff like that. And I think it's just interesting to see how it's exactly like social media. It's like, you can't have a conversation without being on your phone. And now it's like, it's taken to, I can't even look up from like, when I'm crossing the street or driving my car to be able to stop playing this game. And I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of people who are just playing it just to be cool because they're like, oh, it's Pokemon and everybody knows what Pokemon is, even if like you weren't even growing up during that time when it was like originally popular. And it's just crazy to see how many like memes and I don't know, just people getting mugged at like Pokestops and stuff now just because of like how popular it is. I don't know. It's just, I'm literally like at a loss for words, I feel like at this point.
Yeah, I think the fundamental element of it that just bothers me, and it's the fundamental element that bothers me about all mobile gaming, but I think Pokemon Go took it to a new level, which is just like, why do people, I feel like a lot of people were playing it, like you said, not only, or not even first and foremost because they really enjoyed it, but because they like need something to do at all times. Like they can't ever just be at work or with friends or doing anything. You need something on your phone to be like actively doing, even if you're not really enjoying it that much. Like there's no way some of these people were having that much fun throwing curveballs with Pokeballs at, Pokemon on their street, like, or in their house. Like I'm sure some people did, but like, I think it's like people are almost afraid to just relax or sit in silence or like think anymore. They want something to be doing at all times. And mobile games are, a really good way to do that because you have your phone on you all the time. But for me, it's like almost too much, and it just never really appealed to me. I know Pokemon Go, as we were saying, is sort of, I don't know if it's still big or not. A month ago or 2 months ago, everyone on Earth was talking about it. Now they aren't quite so much, but I'm sure it's still doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I work at a library, we've been doing Poke crawls, and the library, a lot of the libraries that are in the area are actual Pokestops or gyms. And it's been really interesting to see. I think it's the first game that I can recall, like off the top of my head, that where businesses actually get a benefit from you gaming, because people are literally coming into your business for the sake of collecting Pokemon or getting, power-ups or whatever it is you can get in the game. And I think that's really interesting. I don't know how successful it's been in terms of like making new customers like at these businesses, or if it's just literally random people walking into your store saying there's like a Pidgey on your countertop and grabbing like a big gulp and leaving, or if it's just, I don't know. I'm not sure how that's affected businesses, if it's good or bad.
I'll give you one example that was actually really funny that made me laugh out loud when I heard our mutual friend Jeff, who's actually the person we want to come on and do the Metal Gear episode with us. He was trying to sell his home, and he actually saw some people outside of his house with like a phone, their phone held out when he came home from work. And his first thought was, oh, there's people coming by to look at our house and take pictures, and they probably want to make an offer or they're checking it out. Nope, they were just there because they saw a Squirtle on his porch and just pulled up and were so he thought his realtor had sent people over to buy his home. Nope, they're just catching Pokemon on his front porch. So kind of a bizarre thing to happen, but it literally was like the weirdest thing ever to hear. That just give you an idea of how pervasive it was for a while. I think that's a good transition maybe into another RPG favorite of ours that has been in the news recently for a very different reason, but for a reason that's equally sort of frustrating, which is Final Fantasy XV's release being pushed back yet again, this time to November. And in a way, I'm okay with that, because ultimately when you wait like a full decade for a game, or like what feels like a decade, at this point I just want it to be good when it finally comes out. So if delaying it a little bit more means it's going to be better upon release, I'm okay with it. But it's just so weird that these things now, it feels like that happens with everything now, movies, games. It's like, I don't know if the people making this stuff are just worse at like estimating when these things are going to be done, but it feels like so much more stuff now gets either delayed or forced out too soon, or nothing ever just seems to go smoothly with the release of anything anymore. I know you were debating even if you'd get a PS4 for this game or not, but I guess you'd have quite some time more to make a decision now because it's pushed all the way back to November.
Yeah, I might wait for the PS4 Slim to come out at a cheaper price and pick one up then for that title, but I'm content right now just replaying some of the older games. Like I said, I just picked up Metal Gear Solid and things like that. So I feel like there's plenty of titles that I can work my way through without really having to worry about new games that are coming out. So really that kind of news doesn't necessarily bother me too much. Although I'm wondering now if like Final Fantasy 15 is delayed because Sony's talking about moving into like the mobile market because of the success of Pokemon Go, and like if they're trying like to spread themselves too thin by going and starting all these like new ventures.
If that was in any way related to one another, I would literally like murder somebody. We're not going to make this grand epic because we're making more bizarre collectible phone games. So.
Makes sense to me, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it does. But no, I mean, Final Fantasy is like that one series where, I mean, even despite all the things that 15 brings to the table, the new sort of action elements, a lot of the fact that it's going to have DLC, all that stuff is sort of questionable to me. There's no question I'm excited for it because, main series Final Fantasies are something I'm always going to try, even if they kind of have been going in a direction I haven't liked the last couple games. It's still going to be exciting, and I've got the collector's edition pre-ordered and all that stuff, which is, I think pre-ordering this kind of stuff is part of the problem because they have your money even before the game's even released. But ultimately, I just thought that getting pushed back for me was like a big piece of gaming news because that's one of the things on the horizon that I'm actually pretty interested in.
There's always Final Fantasy VII Remake to look forward to.
Well, that will be the single most anticipated piece of any form of media, movies, music, television, novels, gaming ever created, in my opinion. So, and that's not an exaggeration. That will be my single most anticipated piece of media ever.
Would you say you're looking forward more to that or the reboot of MacGyver?
Yeah, well, now that you mentioned that, I can see where that would sort of stack up. In a certain way, MacGyver's more exciting, but then in another way, Final Fantasy VII also has its own perks. And I'm glad you posed that question.
The age-old philosophical question.
Yeah, MacGyver or
Cloud Strife.
MacGyver or Meteor, we'll call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the main thing we wanted to do today, guys, was just touch base with you again, talk about a couple of things that have been on our mind. Don't want to belabor the point too much because, ultimately we want to get back to actually making content that's interesting. So I don't know if our next episode will be Metal Gear, but I know Metal Gear is one we want to do soon, if not next. Then beyond that, we're really just going to kind of plan to take it as it comes and just do stuff that makes sense for us, stuff you guys want to hear, get back to what we were really kind of doing when we first started out not that long ago. So, Justin, I thank you for remaining steadfast in the face of great despair. That's a little melodramatic, but
I was in terrible amount of despair, so much so that I had to go away on vacation. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to doing the next episode, and I'm also looking forward to hearing some tips from any of you out there who have played some D&D, because we will be playing for the first time, and any advice that you can give me to beat Cam in the game would be excellent.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That is 100% accurate. We are going to give our first ever go to legit D&D in the next month. I'm going to DM Justin and some of our other friends, Andrew, who's been on the podcast, some other people are all going to play, and that's going to be exciting as hell. So we will definitely touch base about that once we do. Yeah, give us any tips you possibly could, because we're complete noobs, and I don't think you're really necessarily beating anyone. I mean, I'm going to be the dungeon master, but
Well,
I know what you meant. I know what you meant. So thanks, guys, so much. We appreciate you checking this out. We'll be back at you soon. We can be found on Facebook, Twitter, our actual webpage, and then also over on YouTube. The links are all online already, so we won't shove them down your throat. But check us out, guys. Thank you so much. For Cameron and
Justin,
we have been the Limit Breakers Podcast. This is episode 9, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.